again Dr. Seth Marder, who will be talking about vision and ideas for the department. This is intended to be a very interactive exercise, so please ask your questions, talk about ideas, etc. So Seth.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me tell you how I plan to structure this. What I want to do is try to give you as best I can sort of a picture of who I am, how I do things, and what I value, because I think that that is intrinsic to how I would interact with faculty, students, and staff in this department, as well as the administrators with whom I'm going to interact. And I think that we can go into a question and answer about any aspect of hiring or whatever as you like, but I want this to be the underpinning that forms the basis of that discussion. And I'll try to go through it quickly so that we have plenty of time to talk. But, you know, here are the things that I want you to know. First, those people who don't know me, if you do a Google search, you don't get to know much about a person. But I do a lot of research, but fundamentally I'm an educator. Both of my parents were educators, and when I was in elementary school, I knew I was going to be a scientist, I knew I was going to be a teacher, and from elementary school on, I was a teacher. I was always tutoring or teaching or explaining. I like doing that, it's what I do, and I also think that every opportunity where we interact with people is an opportunity to teach. Okay? It's also an opportunity to learn. So it's kind of ingrained in all that I do. I have a very holistic view. Is there a way that we can get I don't know why there's spotlights. Those are spotlights? I don't know if we can get those in.
The controls are back here, but I don't actually know how to use the board.
Okay.
So I may make things worse.
I think the best thing to do is we can turn the projector. Does anybody know how to turn that projector on? Turn the lights on.
Okay, we'll work on that. It's not a big deal if we can't do that. There we go. That works. For me, that looks much better. I have a very holistic view of a professor, one in which the lines between research and education and innovation are blurred. I see them as not separate activities, but very tightly integrated. I can leave out the undoubtedly part. I have a mild form of dyslexia. And along with that comes some advantages and some challenges. I read slowly, okay, and my emails are notoriously full of typographical errors. And if they're not, my colleague, who's been with me as a colleague for 20-something years on with Radar, he says, I can know when you're really pissed off because your email doesn't have errors, which meant that you must have sat there for like an hour, okay? But the nice thing about dyslexia, I don't know if anyone else in the room has dyslexia, okay? Most people don't advertise it. I do, I tell my students, and they find that really interesting that, you know, their professor is not perfect. But it's actually a very powerful thing in a certain different way, in that people who are dyslexic think differently. I'm an associative thinker. I have certain ways of thinking by analogy that other people don't. I tend to work better with incomplete information to fill in holes than people do. And so it's something that I accept, but it's also something about myself that I embrace, okay? I also think, and I think that these two things are not necessarily unrelated, that while I think people consider me a bit of a hard ass in terms of high expectations, I'm relatively empathetic, and I spend a lot of time trying to think about what is on people's mind and to try to see the world from their perspective so that when I'm working with them, okay, I'm not frustrated all the time about the fact that they don't get who I am and what I am, because they are who they are and they're not me. And so I try to understand that, and that's something that I think is important. It's proved very beneficial to me when I'm in situations of conflict, and it's proved beneficial when I'm dealing with things like negotiations. okay? A few aspects on my view. I'm a big picture person. I like to see how things can be integrated. I always look to see, so for example, when we put together large NSF centers, inevitably there are parts on research, education, outreach, this and that, and oftentimes, right, they're outsourced to different people, and I fundamentally don't see them that way. I see there being a fabric where these things are tied together to create a center, not 4 different activities that has the name center under it. And people come to me to work with them on that because I seem to be able to do that reasonably well. I also believe that if things don't violate the laws of thermodynamics, they can be done. And if people they have the option of choosing to make them happen. And I say this because I think a lot of people become tied up in a long debate about whether you can do something or not, rather than how are we going to do this. Okay? So if you tell me something can't be done, you're almost undoubtedly going to get a response, why not? Okay? And I deal with administrators all the time, particularly in places like the fiscal office. Oh, you can't do that. Okay, show me where, what you don't want to do, what may be inconvenient for you to do, can't be done. Why is that? And if it can be done, let's try to figure out a way to do it. While I am a somewhat independent and I like to think critical person, by nature I am a pack animal. I don't really like working on my own. Okay? I mentioned to someone that my door is open all the time, and that at some level that's kind of because it's an attempt to be inviting, but it's also somehow that when I'm by myself, I feel a bit isolated, okay? At least at work. And I would just by nature, if I could do something collaboratively versus by myself, I just find more joy about doing things collaboratively. I am pretty direct. I would tell people that as a New Yorker, I'm about as subtle as a brick, okay? And that is both a strength and a weakness. People know that I'm very honest and straightforward. At times, they would prefer that I was not quite as honest and straightforward, but you tend to know where you stand, okay? Institutional philosophy. I fundamentally believe in the power of ideas, and I'm less concerned by the power of position. This is both an upward-looking thing and a downward-looking thing if you consider your institutional position. So I expect those people who report to me to challenge me directly, and if they don't, I want to encourage them to do so, and I want to know why. I do the same with the people to whom I report. I've gotten into it with the presidents of the institutions I've worked at, with people in the State Department who are relatively high up on various aspects. And fundamentally, I think that the interaction between people has to be based on the ideas, the concepts, and not I'm in this position, you're in that position, therefore I have control over you. I prefer relatively flat organizational structures, and where there are the barriers to communication, there has to be a really strong reason for there to be a barrier to communication. If there isn't, I think that we should avoid that. I also think, and this would apply to me as a department head, that the administration works for us and not the other way around, okay? I would just tell you that how many people here are on, how many faculty members here are on 12-month salaries? The department head is typically one of the people who's on a 12-month salary. The rest of us are paying, at least 3 months of salary. So, you folks, your overhead is paid by myself. When I look at things and I consider what are some of the problems facing the world, energy, an aging population, I'll just tell you as a personal thing, is one that I think is really interesting and one that I've been trying to get people at Georgia Tech to organize around. There are so many opportunities using a combination of technology and sociology to deal with an aging population that we are all having to deal with. All of us have had, or will have, parents who are going to be going through a point where we need to care for them. Or we're going to be at that age where people need to care for us. I think there's a tremendous amount that we can do to make this situation better. Chemistry may not be at the core of this, but places like UT Austin, I think, have opportunity to show leadership in this. And I would say that this is something that's of personal interest. Uneven distribution of wealth, climate change, I hope that's an okay word to use around here. Sustainability, pollution, resource management, overpopulation, terrorism, intolerance, information management. And I bolded the ones where I see personally obvious ways where a chemistry department can actually impact these things. Although I think that if people are thoughtful, they can probably find ways to impact all of these things. And this is not meant to be an extensive list, but it's just some of the things that I've been thinking about. In science and technology, I read your strategic plan, and I really think that people, by and large, hit the nail on the head in terms of the areas that you think you're targeting for work. Some of the things that I will talk about, and they're not fully separated, is non-covalent chemistry. We're pretty good, although we're not as good as we need to be at making bonds. We're not as good as controlling materials and molecules in terms of their non-covalent interactions. This presents very interesting theoretical challenges. I think it really pushes theory very, very hard. And it also presents very interesting chemical challenges. Catalysis, it's amazing what's happening in catalysis today. And I think that catalysis with earth-abundant elements, I think, is going to happen more and more. It may not be by the standard mechanisms that I was taught when I learned organic chemistry. I just saw an article, and I was aware of the work beforehand by the Grubbs group on doing CH activation using potassium T-butoxide as a catalyst. Okay? And so I think there's going to be quite a revolution in how we think about catalysis. And I think that, again, many of the things that I was taught 30 years ago will continue to be part of it, but it's going to be a much bigger picture than that. Multi-length scale chemistry and materials and biology, I think, is going to be very important. We're pretty good at targeting things at very small length scales. Engineers are pretty good at targeting things at very long length scales. I think the bridging of that's important. Of personal interest to me are interfaces, and I notice that people here call that out. There are tons of interfaces that we are dealing with. There are biological interfaces, and there's an awful lot of interesting science that's going on here. And one of the things that I felt gratifying in terms of my own possible way of interacting with this department, separate from being a chair, is that mechanisms to probe interfaces, complex interfaces, not simple interfaces, not some single crystal material in an ultra-high vacuum, but real interfaces, is an area where a lot of work is needed, and in particular buried interfaces. And I was very happy to see that there are quite a few people here developing analytical techniques to do this. I think that this is going to be important. You can have, obviously, an impact on education, entrepreneurship. I've been involved in spinning off companies, and I work with a ton of companies. I don't know if I want to spin off any more companies. I've been there, I've done that. It's actually, for those people who have done it, it's actually hard work, and it actually comes with responsibility. You know, it's an interesting thing when you have someone's mortgage, when you're responsible for them being able to pay their mortgage. But I think that there are opportunities for us to make sure that the work that we do doesn't stop with a paper. And I've had some experience with that. I've had several of my things patented, commercialized. And I think that this is an area where perhaps the department may want to put things into place. Outreach, I think that we are a public institution, and the more that the community understands what we do, why we do it, A, the better off we are as an institution, B, the better off the community is, and C, I think we will feel more gratified. 2 weekends ago, I was at the Atlanta Science Festival talking to kids about OLEDs and things like that, how things line up, and it's just very rewarding. And you know, I don't know how much that's part of people's lives, but I think that many years ago I was part of an NSF Science and Technology Center, and I went to NSF to talk about an idea that I had that I referred to as a diversity catalyst. And what do I mean by that? I mean that, fundamentally, I think most people like working on diversity-related issues, but there's a barrier, okay? And that's the same for outreach. I think most people would enjoy doing outreach, but there's a barrier. I think there are things that the department can do to lower the barrier for people to get involved in terms of outreach, to make the connections. So rather than you having to find out where you can be and who you have to contact, if you express an interest, we can help you get to where you need to be so that you can focus on the interaction with the people and the content and not all the organizational things. And I think that that's something where at least the department head can play some role in creating an environment. Partnering with other departments on campus. I have to say very frankly, relative to Georgia Tech, this place is much more siloed in my opinion, okay? It sounds like the departments of the departments, within the departments, divisions of the divisions, within the divisions, the subdivisions of the subdivisions. And I think an identity is important, but I think that it can come with a price. And I will just tell you that I think that just from what little I know, and I'm perfectly happy to be corrected, I think Georgia Tech does this way better than UT Austin, okay? All of the buildings that have built in the last 2009, from 1999 on, we've not built departmental buildings. We've built interdisciplinary research buildings that have research neighborhoods which collect people by areas of interest rather than departmental affiliation. Okay? You have much more contact time. It's well known the more time that you have collisions, it's like chemical reactions. Scientifically, the more time you have collisions with people, the more time you're going to potentially have productive collisions that lead to collaborations. And if you see people with different backgrounds a lot more, you're more likely to interact with them. I think that the divisional nature of departments, from a standpoint of research, I think there's a value to it from a standpoint of undergraduate education. Beyond that, I don't think that there's a huge value to it, okay? I know that there are people in this room who absolutely disagree with me. That's why we're having this conversation. If there are enough people who disagree with me, go find someone who agrees with me, okay? But this is where I stand, this is the way I think, this is what I want to do. I want to bring down the barriers for interactions within the department, between departments. I asked someone today, how many people in your department have appointments in other departments? And the answer was not that many. In my department and across Georgia Tech, it's routine. Okay, I was on the phone yesterday by email before I came here with our Dean of Science, talking about someone who's now an associate professor at Berkeley, did her PhD in physics in Cambridge. I want to hire her. She thought, well, I'm an ECE at Berkeley, that's where I want to be here. I said, can we do a joint appointment in physics? And he said, well, looking at her package and everything about her, I can't see why the physicist wouldn't be interested in having her in the appointment. But once you have people in ECE and physics working together enough, they're less likely to be competing with each other for resources, okay? We need to find more and more opportunities at the divisional level, at the departmental level, at the college level, where we are creating win-wins and where in an environment of limited resources, we are working together to most effectively use those resources to create opportunities both within our department, but opportunities where the institution is winning, okay? I'm going to say that again, okay? We need to stop thinking about being a department. We need to start thinking about being part of a university and making the university better. Now, if you don't believe in that, definitely I am not the right person for you, okay? If you do believe in that, I think that you have tremendous opportunities that you may not have effectively tapped. Okay? I collaborate with all people, all kinds of people. I would just say that we have folks in my center that we created, the Center for Organic Electronics and Photonics, various engineering disciplines, and we have strong ties with public policy. We have an I-group that I helped to organize that is completely joint between engineering, science, and policy. How many people have collaborators in policy? Okay, drug tech has very technology-oriented policy, and I learn a lot from these folks. And I will also tell you that I'm absolutely convinced that the reason that we won this hybrid is because we put policy and engineering and science together. How many of you guys would consider that to be one of your high choices of something to do? Okay? How many proposals do you think NSF gets that have groups who have put bio or nanomaterials for energy in parts of proposals? I think quite a few. How many had nanomaterials for energy and policy? I think very few. Okay? These give you ways to distinguish yourself from the rest of the crowd. Okay? So in addition to being a really good thing to do, it's something that can make you more competitive if you want to be more competitive. Here are the values that I think are very important. I value scholarship. I value the quality of the work that we do. I value the idea that we are here to serve our institution. I very strongly value diversity. I've had talks with various people, and there is, in my mind, a fallacy of the trade-off between quality and diversity. Okay? It's just not true. You can have a very diverse environment, and you can demand extremely high quality. And people need to move past the attitude that, either we're going to have diversity or we're going to have quality. Okay? What you have to be willing to accept is that we're not going to have quality without diversity. Okay? And once you make that decision, then you have a good chance of ending up with both a diverse department and a high quality department. It takes work, but so does everything else that we do. Okay, so I would say let's get that moving. Integrity, I don't want to get into a detail of that here. People, I think, probably know more about some of those issues than I do. But it's in how we act on a daily basis. Respect for each other, collaboration. Okay? We need, if we want to have really good things, we need to find the time, we were talking about that earlier, we need to find the time to invest in our colleagues. And when I say invest in our colleagues, I mean invest time. And time is our most precious resource. I've told people, one of the ways I do that is I don't have kids, and I love to cook. So I have a lot of time where I bring people over to the house for dinner, I cook. Sometimes they even come over, they cook with me, and we sit and we drink wine and we talk. And it's great. Okay? I can't say that this works for all people, but I just think that if we spend more time investing and thinking about our colleagues, we're going to have a more cohesive, tighter department. And, when times are good, that may not be so important. But over the last 7 years, when we've gone through a fiscal nightmare and funding is tight and resources are tight, I think that if you're really close to your colleagues, that's going to make it easier for you to work through those issues. Okay. How can the sum be greater than, how can the total be greater than the sum of the parts? Collaboration. Look for win-wins. Okay? Holistic view of big problems. Big problems typically can't be solved by single investigators. Okay? There are just too many aspects of them. And so I see these problems as opportunities. Sometimes it's not obvious where the dots are, and I think that this is in some cases where my dyslexia helps me. I see connections between things that other people don't see connections, and I see those as opportunities to go in and tackle a problem, and also to get a competitive advantage because maybe someone hasn't looked at things this way. Okay? There is an opportunity to have integration of research, education, and tech transfer, as I talked, and you need visionaries who see new dots and connect the dots. Okay? So, another issue that we need to think about is when we are doing hiring in this place, okay, Dean Hickey tells me that we have the opportunity to hire on the order of 5 new senior faculty over the next 5 years with endowed chairs. okay? That's a huge opportunity, that's a huge responsibility for us if we're to do that, okay? Who are we going to hire? What do we want to look like 10 years from now? And what are the characteristics of the people who we want to hire that are going to get us to be the department that we want to be? So I believe, just as I was saying with diversity issues, that you can have people who are both technical leaders and institutional leaders, okay? And you can have both. I see I left out a word here, okay? So you need people who are effective listeners, who can articulate and inspire their colleagues as well as the administration. The administration is not going to give us resources because we're chemistry and we're great, okay? There may have been a time where money was flowing and you could just go and say, we need money. We're not in that time anymore, okay? No matter where you go, you're not in that time anymore. So we need to be able to articulate clearly our vision as to what it is we want to do and how we want to do it and why it is good for people. We also need to try to think about who are we going to hire? Are we going to hire the lone wolf? Are we going to hire a pack animal? Okay? And, you know, I'm a pack animal. At some point, I'm the leader of the pack, and sometimes I'm part of the pack. Okay? And, you know, a true characteristic of a pack animal is that in different environments, they're comfortable being in different positions, okay? So we need people who are willing to lead, but we also need people who are willing to participate in someone else's project, okay? And not view that leadership by the other person as a threat to what they are doing. Do we choose to hire people looking for that? I think in general we don't typically. And I think that we need to, okay? You know, can they raise resources? That's pretty easy to determine. Do they actually derive satisfaction from seeing the success of other people, okay? If we were talking about mentoring programs, okay? Our mentoring program, the fundamental thing that drives a mentoring program is not a piece of paper that says, you know, we lost a whole bunch of people to not getting tenure. We need to put this thing in place so that we don't lose more people, okay? We have to, the thing that drives it is genuinely seeing our colleagues be successful and basically taking both pleasure and pride in the fact that we've been able to help make them successful. Sometimes that means that we have to give of our time a bit and that we can't do something else. We have to ask, what do we want to be? That's something that I think is very important. Okay. Management style. I get deeply involved in the details of things. And earlier in my career, when I didn't have the village around me that allows me to look at higher level problems, more and more higher level problems, working with different teams, I did. But my preferred management style is to surround myself with people who are excellent. I always say just hire people better than you are and you'll do pretty well. Clearly define goals and let the team take ownership of tasks. This is something that's powerful at multiple levels. Okay? One, it frees you to do other things. Two, the thing that causes staff to be frustrated typically is not their salary, but it's a sense that they're not empowered, okay? If you train these people well, if you invest in them, if you give them feedback as to when they are succeeding and not succeeding, I think you can have, I have, a very effective team, okay, that makes them satisfied with their job, and they stay around a long time, and allows you to focus on other things. For example, like spending time talking. Okay? I do like to empower my team to use their creative skills and judgment. I am, and this is an aspect of diversity, I don't believe that there's only one way to solve problems. And too often I think we get attached to our approach to solving a problem and it being a better approach, and then ego sort of becomes a defining thing. Who's in charge? Who has the power? And, I'm a very bottom line kind of person. We're here, we're there, how do we get from here to there? There are multiple ways of getting from here to there. If there's not a particular reason that my way is the way we get from here to there versus someone else's way, whatever. It's just the way I don't have the time, okay, to get into the fact that there may be minor advantages in one thing or another. And oftentimes, when you put the time into it, what you may gain in the delta epsilon of your approach, you lose in the goodwill of the people who are working for you. Okay, so the question then is, how do we succeed? Well, one way is we choose the things that we want to do. The other way is we look at the things that could stand in our way of success, and we can avoid them. Okay? But we have to be aware of them. So territorialism, I think, is a problem. Okay? At least 2 or 3 people told me that the arguments in academia are so large because the stakes are so small. Okay? We conceptualize that. We understand that. And yet, we have it's a thing that's so common that it's a joke. Okay? So let's think about that. This is related to ego. I think we need leaders. We need high levels of standards for scholarship. That's not a problem here. You guys have incredibly high standards of scholarship. Education based on knowledge rather than the synthesis of ideas. I think that, I don't know, I think that that's probably not a problem here. Okay, we're not basically giving people knowledge, but I think probably here people are trying to teach people how to synthesize things. Fear-based staff management, okay? I'm the boss, you're not doing this right, you're at risk. I think that we need to, it's possible for a short time, but it's unsustainable, okay? If you don't have people who are performing up to snuff, you have to go through the hard job of getting them out, or you need to find out what is the problem and fix it. But you can't just beat the crap out of people for an extended period of time. It just won't work. Risk aversion. One of the things that I'm a little concerned about at my current institution is that, and it has to probably do in part with the budget. It has to do in part with reputation. The higher the reputation, the more there is to lose. But still, you need to be at a point where you are willing to take risks. Okay? Resources are a challenge. The things that I'm hearing from people, okay, is that resources are becoming more available in time. Okay? So as a department, we need to think about how are we going to make a case to use those resources to help the university in such a way that we grow internally as well. Okay? Time. Okay? We all have demands in our time. If I have one thing I can say is try to find the time for your colleagues. Okay? You'll be amazed how good you will feel about being interactive with these folks. And if you have to write one less paper here, maybe, and you can go and you can spend time with your assistant professors, I think it's going to be a worthwhile trade-off. I try to, I don't necessarily succeed, but I think that's basically it. How I try to define what I do and why, I'm not going to go through this. This is not necessary. Thoughts about collaboration. This is probably where I'll stop. Yeah?
Seth, on your obstacle list,
Yeah.
one thing I didn't see was excessive bureaucracy. Do you think that's an obstacle?
I think it's an obstacle. I don't know if it's a relative obstacle. Okay, I don't know. I will just tell you that it is a manifestation of this. In general, the bureaucracy that we have is an institutional manifestation of risk. Okay? If you look at what they're trying to have you do, that you see as ridiculous, it's because we are increasingly concerned about litigation and audits and things like that. okay? And I will go back to the fact that I ask questions, and it has to do, I've had direct interactions where people say, oh, you can't do this, coming from our sponsored research department or our ordering department. I just say, why? Okay? A lot of the bureaucracy that we have are not policies, but they are traditions or procedures. Okay? And what I do is I challenge people to show me exactly, I understand you're doing it this way. Show me where it is written that we must do it that way. I challenge people, I just challenge them. It's like, okay, you say we have to do it this way? Show me, where does it say that we have to do it this way?
We get some things from the legislature where you can see it right away.
Well, in that case, you're hosed. and let me just say that, Alan, let me finish. Okay? If I come here, I'm going to be a department head, not a miracle worker. Okay? Part of being an effective department head is knowing when to fight the battles and when not to fight the battles. There are battles you can win, there are battles you can't win. Okay? What do you want? You want me as a department head to go and fight the legislature?
But the question is, have you ever been in a position where you had to fight a battle?
Yes.
It was a losing battle.
Well, I can tell you that I've had export control problems, and I went with the Georgia Tech head of the whole research program to Washington, went and did battle with them, and in that particular case, I lost it. You know what ended up happening as a result of this? I ended up on a Department of Commerce committee called ETRAC, the Emerging Technology and Research Advisory Committee, appointed by the Secretary of Commerce to work on redoing export control language, okay? And it turns out we just happened to be there at a time when Obama decided we're going to redo this. And so I lost the battle, but we were able to ensure that there was certain language put into the following years of export control stuff, where I think we may have, and time will tell, won the war. Okay? But I made a decision that if I'm on this committee, which I was for 4 years, and we met for originally a day a month, and then 2 days every 2 months, okay? And I had to chew the shit out of people in the State Department publicly to get stuff done, because I don't give a shit, okay? I'm willing to do that. But I had to have the sense of, is this just making me feel good, or am I accomplishing things? I keep going back to the fact, I'm a bottom line kind of person, okay? If I can accomplish something, I'll go do battle. If the only thing I'm going to accomplish is get myself frustrated and other people frustrated, there are too many other battles that I can fight where I don't have to do that. That's the way I choose my battles. It does answer your question. But, you know, yeah, I've fought and I've lost, but then I've come back to fight another day. And I didn't get my compound, which absorbed in the infrared, shipped to the Imperial College, but I did get language put into, I can't say I did. I and a committee made sure that there was language put into export control policy, which meant that people in the future wouldn't have to deal with things like that. Which meant that there was clarification about what truly is the fundamental research exclusion. So, yeah, okay, I don't live in an ivory tower, and I can also tell you that by nature, and I wish this was not true, by nature, if something is wrong, I point it out. And what I've learned at Georgia Tech is the consequence of that is I end up on a gazillion committees and task force, okay? No good deed goes unpunished, okay? But I do point it out, and I do believe that if I have a problem with it, then I do also have a responsibility to try to get in there and not simply complain about it, but see if there's something that I can do to fix it. Okay. Let me end with thoughts about collaboration. Okay, I like this. It's something I live by. If you don't want to cook a meal for a person at your house and open a bottle of wine, it's probably best not to collaborate. If you do, you probably have a pretty good basis for a collaboration, and I actually literally do that, okay? People ask me, where does my mentoring occur? A lot of it occurs over my dining room table with a meal that I've cooked and wine from my wine cellar, and the mentoring gets better after usually between the second and third bottle of wine. Okay? Certainly the communication is a lot looser. Okay? Treat your collaborators like friends and family, and most of the time they'll reciprocate. When you're initiating a collaboration, think about what you can do for them and not what they can do for you. I ask my students to do this all the time. Good collaborations are like vintage port, and I'm very fond of vintage port, and will improve with age. Bad collaborations are just like sushi. Okay? Finally, 2 quotes. And these are 2 quotes. I like quotes, okay, but these are 2 that I think, if you understand them, you understand me. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. That was said by Robert Kennedy. And the other quote is attributed to Robert Kennedy because he said it so often that people thought it was his, but it's George Bernard Shaw. Some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? Okay, so with that, I'm going to end what I have to say and then just take questions from you. And whatever you want to throw at me, throw it at me. Okay? I may not have the right answer, but I'll just give you whatever answer I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I really like your discussion in the big picture. So let's say that there are 5 spots over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
How would you, in detail, go about deciding who to go after and how to attract them?
The way I would go about it is by initiating a discussion with the department and seeing, first asking what is it, literally, what is it we want to accomplish by hiring these people? Okay? And who do we think can be moved? Possibly. You know, what is it that we think can attract them to here? What are they going to contribute to Austin? And see if we can build a consensus about that. I would not go after it, as I said, in a divisional way. People ask me, what am I looking for with hiring? And I say, inspiration. Okay? And that inspiration is not dictated to materials or organic materials. Okay? Who are the people you folks find inspiring? Who you'd like to work with on a day in and day out basis who you think is going to make this a better place? Let's have that discussion. Let's arrive at a list of people and let's start getting these people through for talks and seeing whether our colleagues go, wow, you know, I really liked having that person here. That was a great talk, and then move from there. Okay? Topical areas, I mean, your strategic plan lays that out. I think, as I said, your strategic plan from the area perspective, you just hit all the nails on the head. Okay? And so I think there's a good chance that the people who you look at will fall generally into these areas. They may be makers, they may be measurers, they may be calculators. Okay? But let's have the discussion as a department, not as little individual groups. That's the way I would approach it. Other questions? Yeah.
So you may have heard during your time here that staffing in the department has been reduced pretty greatly over the last 5 years, over 45%.
Yes.
And while we certainly had dead weight and fat to trim, again, we had no problem doing that. We're at the point now where we have pretty much a core group of, I think most people would say, pretty qualified staff members who understand and embrace that their mission is to support the highest levels of service to the faculty and students. That being said, raises have been mediocre at best, either 2% or 0 is the pool we've been working with. And
We've had 1 raise since 2008. We just found out this year The total pool is 2.5%.
So we're allowed to assign 2% to our staff.
Okay?
And well, what we're concerned with, or certainly I'm concerned with now, is that some of these core people are going to start to leave. And almost to a person, that would be detrimental to our department. And so I kind of like to know your ideas on how you attract and retain the quality staff that are reporting to the department in the absence of financial rewards.
So I attract and retain my own, I have staff which is part of my team, part of centers, and I have more flexibility because the money that I have for these folks, some of it's from the institution, some of it's from grants. And so I have a little more flexibility to help with that. I can tell you something, you know, I mentioned that I sold a company, and I'm not suggesting that people do this, but I'll just tell you, 8 years ago I sold a company, and we had a windfall, okay? And I felt that this was an intrinsic problem for the department. So what I did was I created an endowment with part of my windfall, specifically for staff development activities. And I'm funding that endowment, okay? And the thing is, it's gonna turn out $1,000 a year, okay? But I would just say that if you do things where you send someone to a meeting, which is important to them, or you do something that's important to them, the recognition that people are important doesn't make up for lack of salary, but the absence of the recognition is not compensated by a 2% or a 3% salary raise. So I think that we need to ask, you know, what is it that we can do as individuals to say to the people who are here working and doing well, we really appreciate that you are part of the whole thing that makes us capable of being who we are. How many people, you know, how many people actually do that? I mean, I do that again through Food and Wine. So next week, I think it's actually this week, it's faculty recognition. So I'm going to take a bunch of people out for lunch and leave them with a bottle of wine, okay? It's not a big thing, but it's at least someone saying, you know, you helped me. I really appreciate that. And I think that goes a long way, okay? It's not going to magically generate tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of raises, okay? But a lot of people will stay when they are valued and when they feel that they are part of a team. Not that there is the team, which is the faculty and the students, and then there is the staff meant to serve the team, okay? Yeah.
So, do you have any concept about how your time allocation might break down? Were you to come here, would
You mean between research and other things?
and, yeah, ensuring the department and
Cooking food.
yeah, catering. I don't know.
Let me just say, I've been very fortunate. I've been effective at raising money, okay? And so I've been able to have people who are permanent staff members work with me for a long time, and they help me run my group, okay? These people are incredibly expensive. The thing that they buy me is time. And so as I said, I'm on all kinds of institutional committees at Georgia Tech. If I were to come here, I'd have to fundamentally recognize that my ability to serve on those different kinds of committees would be tremendously decreased, and that my contribution to the institution would have to be channeled through the position of the department. So that's one answer. I think that I might have to cut back my research group size a bit.
How large is your group right
It's
now?
about 25, including undergrads, plus or minus. It went up to 40 at one point, and that was just unpleasant. Okay? I know I can manage a group of 30, 35. I'm just happier with a group of around 20 people plus undergrads and a high school student. Okay? It goes back to this issue of giving people power to make decisions. I have these senior people, okay, and we've been working together for an awful long time. They know how I think, they know how I write, I've taught them to think and write, okay? And so they work with me and they give me time to interact with people, okay? I'm gonna have to focus that time towards department head things with some maybe modifications in my time for some research programs. But that's, you know, that's my thought process, okay? Will it be wrong? Almost undoubtedly. Will I have to adapt it? Almost undoubtedly. Have I been doing this for 27 years of my professional career or more? Yes. Okay? I'm here, I'm still standing, okay? I'm still married happily, okay? I still have the time to cook for people. I think that I will figure out a way to make it work. Other questions? Yeah.
So, looking at the kind of funding mechanisms moving forward, there's a lot more centers and hubs and things of this nature. So I'm just wondering if you could say your kind of forward-looking opinion about how a department and, you know, the things that are close to a department at the administrative level can support collaborations that are moving towards getting these types of centers, which often don't take weeks to build, they don't take months to build, you know, it can take years or a few years to really nail one of these big things. But you know, you don't get it unless you have some infrastructure there. So I'm just interested to know
You tell me what infrastructure you need. I'll tell you what infrastructure you need, in my opinion. But you tell me first what infrastructure you need.
I think it's good if there's internal mechanisms to, you know, help with collaborations, of which some are kind of forthcoming in recent years or months. And I think that just ways of getting people who are interested in, you know, finding common ground, people who are already around, you know,
Yep.
things like this.
What do you think in the end of the day, what do you think the limiting factor is for that?
Me personally,
I have a very strong opinion, but I want to hear your opinion first.
I think it's a 50-50 mix between having, you know, a funding to do something and having the right environment where people commit to doing something together. I think those two
What is
things-
that environment based on?
risk.
It's based on the underlying desire to work with your colleague. It's based on investing the time to build the relationship, okay? And you may not believe me, and that's perfectly well, but I've been doing this, I've been involved in God knows how many centers. And the centers that say, oh, we're gonna go after an NSF XYZ, we'll put people together, they typically don't work. The centers where people have built relationships and say, oh, that's what, and the way mine, people come into my office and we just sit and we talk, okay? And I can, you know, I can always have a student help out a little bit, okay? It's the mindset that you want to spend the time working with this person. The money in the absence of that commitment will not do it, okay? But the first thing that people have to decide is that they really, really want to work with this, and this is a really interesting problem, okay? It doesn't take a huge amount of money to create that, okay? It takes taking someone out to lunch, okay, or buying them a cup of coffee. I bought an espresso machine for a good espresso machine. It's amazing what kind of an effective tool that is for collaboration. Okay, people go there, they actually, literally, by the way, if you literally make a cappuccino for somebody, you know about microaggressions? There are these things called microaggressions. That's the opposite. There are like micro investments. You literally just go and you foam up some milk and you make someone a cappuccino, and you'll have a conversation, okay? And you're saying, oh, this is glib, okay? But it's an intrinsic part of a process that nucleates those conversations day in and day out, okay?
I think another part of this is something that you mentioned on the hires, which is bringing in senior people, shareholders who want to do some heavy lifting and help lead teams of younger faculty. You know, if we don't have people at those levels who are really helping to organize us, who've been through the trenches of things, you can have a desire to collaborate. You need that. But you're only going to get so far. So I really agree with your comments on hiring at senior level, not just looking for people who want self-aggrandizement, but are in it, you know, to help forward the cause.
I also think that there needs to be a specific understanding how junior faculty are treated in these kinds of collaborations, because we have a model right now where people are rewarded for their simple investigator grants, and yet we all know that we're moving towards collaborative funding schemes. And so a junior faculty is incredibly focused on what they have to do. They have money to do it, and yet you're asking them also to bootstrap collaborations, which will help them out in the long run. But how do you make sure they're protected and encouraged and rewarded?
I can tell you how I do it. Okay, so when we had an NSF STC, I mentioned negotiation. I negotiated when we moved from Arizona to Georgia Tech that we get, it's that time when there's a 30% match. And I've killed it for everyone because it's never going to happen again. Okay, when I was in Arizona, I negotiated that we got a 30% match, direct cost, in cash. When I went in to tell the VP for research that, when I went and told my colleague I was going to ask the VP for research to give me that, he just laughed. When I went in and asked the VP for research, I was expected to do that. He just gave us the money. I was late. Okay? Then when I moved to Arizona, from Arizona to Georgia Tech, we got that agreement in place, and they agreed not to charge any tuition on any of the students. Okay? So we had $1 million of funding a year, approximately, with $300,000 of overhead-free money and no tuition for students. Where do you think I invested that money? Okay? And those people are now leaders. Okay? It's just not rocket science. Okay? It's just not rocket science. Our job is to make those opportunities available to our junior collaborators, okay? They don't have to come begging to us for a collaborator. We need to go to them and say, you know, hey, we're putting this grant together. Do you see a way where, you know, what you're doing on this might fit in? Boom.
But I think Mike's question actually was directly at that. How do you personally are quite successful at
I
that.
say you have to lead by example, and you need to hire people who have the same philosophy. Okay? And I go back to the fact that you can't accept hiring of people who don't share that philosophy. You just can't accept that. Okay? No more than you would accept hiring a senior faculty member who has one grant from NSF that pays $150K a year. You wouldn't accept that, right? So why is it that you will accept hiring someone who doesn't have a demonstrated track record of investing in young people? Tell me, somebody, anyone in the room, explain to me the logic of that. Somebody. If you know it, explain it to me, and then tell me, do we do that or do we not do that? And if we do something that we can't explain the logic to, then why don't we just change what we're doing? Okay? I know people say, well, it's easier said than done. How often have we tried? How often have you fundamentally taken the decision to go and really make that a priority. That is your investment in the future. Okay?
So how successful has Georgia Tech been, in your opinion, at that? Has your department done a very good job in the last 5 to 10 years of really only bringing in higher level people who have that sense?
Yeah, actually. We brought in we have. Okay. I mean, we brought in the group from Arizona who I know have those values. Okay. We brought in MG Finn from Scripps. We brought in a guy named John Reynolds from Florida, who I specifically chose. And, okay, John is a great scientist, but I think we could have found a scientist who maybe is better at X, Y, and Z. But if you know John, John invests in people. We brought in Yunan Shah, who is very quiet. Okay, he's a very soft-spoken person, but he invests in other young people, and he invests with his time. I think that we were pretty damn good at doing that. And I think that, you know, when we created COPE, we started the Center for Organic Photonics, and there were 4 of us, okay? And we brought in young people, and we took care of them. And those young people went on, and they did well, and they got tenure. And guess what they are doing now? They're doing what we did, okay? We nucleated a center based on people, okay? And it's recognized throughout the Georgia Tech campus. The provost, who is now at Taos, would talk about that repeatedly. He said, this is different than other centers, okay? And he's told us, he said, you know, you've brought to Georgia Tech so much more than academic excellence. You've provided a model by which other centers should exist. You want to set yourself a challenge? Be the department that is a model for how other departments should be, so that they aspire to be you, okay? Not just to have the ranking that you have, but to where people look and go, this is a great department, okay? These people really get along well, they like each other, they're doing great stuff. That's it, okay? I've been involved in doing that. It's not a matter of policy, it's a matter of fundamentally every day when you get in, what do you look for as your opportunities, okay? Do you stick your head into someone's door and say, how's it going? Okay? I just think that this is where I derive my satisfaction, okay? You either do or you don't. Maybe if you don't, then, but try to find people who do. I may not be that person for you, but I'm just saying if I leave you with something, ask yourself some of these questions. And when you ask yourself 10 years from now who you are, forget about whether it's catalysis or asymmetric this or analytical that. Ask yourself, as a department, who do you want to be? And I think that you'll end up being a better department if you ask yourself those questions and you actually take steps to move in that direction. Okay?
So I think we should wrap up soon if there are any final questions. Okay.
There is one.
Oh, one final question. Ben.
Okay, so let me ask you a general question. I was quite impressed with your presentation both yesterday and today. I think you're a wonderful scientist and you're interested in education. But I also think you are very good at administration, so you seem to enjoy it. Okay? And you did this, that part of your who you are at the slides. So I'm just curious. You have done very well at Georgia Tech, and what's the reason you want to move?
So the simple answer is I'm not sure I want to move. But I'm sure that if I decide that I stay, it's because I've convinced myself that there isn't a place where I can get more accomplished. Okay? And the thing that has led me to think about that, and I've told many people this, the viscosity at Georgia Tech has increased. The fear component of how they do things has increased. And the shift to being an economic powerhouse for the state and spinning off companies has become more predominant than, in my opinion, the focus on making Georgia Tech a leading intellectual institution. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of people about this, my wife. The problem for me is that if I could just ignore that and do my own little thing, I'd be fine. But in a manner that is a weakness on my part, I can't let it go, okay? If they can't accommodate that aspect of me and create the environment for me to thrive in that way, it just, and it's been doing it long enough because I love my colleagues. I have great labs. It's unlikely that you'll be able to offer me tangibly much better than I have, okay? So what it's gonna end up having to be, you're gonna have to offer me tangibly what I have, but what you're gonna have to be able to offer is the opportunity to move in an environment that's less viscous and help build something, okay? And it got to a point at Georgia Tech where how do you describe it? Where you see the possibility, you know this needs to be done, and yet you hit a barrier. And I'm not one who gives up, but when that barrier is there for a period of years, and you just see the barrier, you know, like the tunneling experiment, right? And the wider the barrier, okay, the harder it is just to tunnel through it. And that is the thing that got me thinking about, well, you know, maybe it's time to find a different environment where what I'm trying to accomplish is more philosophically aligned with what the leadership of the institution is trying to accomplish. That is the world for me right now, okay? I mean, it's not the standard reason, it's not like I'm pissed off at anybody. I'm frustrated, but the people who run the place, I like. You know, the VP for research is a good friend of mine, okay? We get together at the end of every semester, and we sit and we drink wine and we talk honestly. But fundamentally, where he sees Georgia Tech going and where I see Georgia Tech going, even though he says, yeah, I get it, he doesn't get it. Okay? And I love him, but he doesn't get it. And that's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This has been a very
Okay,
good session.
thank you.